Hey, I'm Courtney Waterman, your tutor. Lover of anime, manga, and math. And you just tuned into another session of Tutor Me Sempai. Welcome back, everyone. Today we're jumping into a 9th grade topic, radicals. Now, if you're new to my channel, I'll be putting time codes in for this video in the description box below, so use that to skip ahead to whatever part of the video you think is most interesting. As always, if you have any question about what you see here today or even your own homework, feel free to put that in the comment box below or visit me on my Facebook page at Tutor Me Sempai and tell me all about it there. Now, if you're ready to jump into some basics of some radicals, hit that like button, smash the subscribe button, and let's get started. The first thing we want to talk about today is going to be the parts of a radical. So this is going to be your typical radical here, the square root of 4. There are 3 main parts of any radical. Now I say 3, but it's really like 2 to 3, depending on the type of radical. So there's going to be 3 main parts I'm going to talk about, and I'm going to discuss why one of them is kind of there some of the time. So this is square root of 4. The 3 parts of your radical is going to be index as 1, is going to be the radicand as a second, and the radical symbol, or you can say the root sign. These are going to be the 3 main parts of any radical. Now I say 2 to 3 sometimes because the index is something that shows up in most of the radicals, but not necessarily all of the radicals. So here's an example in which the index is not here. Now it is there, but it's not. It's an understood 2 in this case. The index is going to be an understood 2. And because this is the basic radical, the square root, we don't tend to write the index. But for all the other radicals that you're going to run into, the index is going to be determined and visible. So whether it's a 3, whether it's a 4, whatever it may be, the index will be there unless it's a 2. You don't typically write the index for a square root or a root 2. So let's set this back to a 2 and let's continue our parts. So we know that the index, if I were to draw an arrow, the index is going to be this small number right here. Now I'll tell you what the index means, but I just want to identify the parts first. The radicand is going to be what's under the root sign. So you already know what the root sign of the radical symbol is, right? That's going to be this whole little thing right here, this piece right here. This is your radical symbol or your root sign. The radicand is what's under that root sign or the radical symbol, and the index is going to be the small number that's outside. Now it's important that you don't get confused with the coefficient that could be outside as well. You might have stuff that looks like this. That is not the index. It's the small number. This is going to be your coefficient. This is something that's multiplied by your radical. This is not the index. Your index is always going to be the small part that kind of sits at the tail end or the very beginning, however you want to look at it, of this radical symbol. So we've identified the parts, but what are they? Yeah, it's nice to know that that's the index and that's the radicand, but what do they mean? What is the significance of this? Well, let's first talk about the index, because the index is going to be very, very, very important. So the index of a radical is going to be the thing that determines what kind of radical you have. Now we have an infinite number of radicals because we can go all the way from 2 to infinity. Well, not really infinity, but we can keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, and we will have a radical for that. And that's because this index can just keep growing. But what is the index? Well, the index tells you what kind of root you have or what kind of radical you have. When you have an index of 2 like you have here, that's pretty much going to say we have some number that when multiplied by itself twice, so I'm going to say x, our number. Some number when multiplied by itself twice, we're going to get this inside number. So this is our radicand. If you remember, I just said that. This is our radicand. And when we have an index of 2, we multiply the number by itself twice here. And when we get that, that's going to be what our radicand is going to equal. So the index is going to control what our radical is. This is a square root, but let's say you had something like this. Well, this is going to say when you have a number multiplied by itself 3 times. So this is a 3 here. 3 times is going to give you your radicand. So the index controls what type of radical you have. This is a square root, this is a cube root, and you see square, cube. Another name is the second root or the third root. So in talking about what the index is, we've already kind of discussed what the radicand is, right? That's going to be the number that we're going to be pretty much trying to find when we're multiplying our numbers together. The radicand is going to be your number of interest whenever you're dealing with radicals, because you want to make sure you get as close to this as possible whenever you're trying to solve a radical. If you're multiplying your number by itself multiple times and you overshoot the radicand is pretty much telling you, hey, bring it back. You've gone too far. That's not the correct answer. You don't want to overshoot your radicand. This is going to be the point of interest that we're concerned with. Think of it as your bullseye. So we have the index, which pretty much controls what type of radical you have. And then you have your radicand, which is your number of interest that you're trying to hit. And of course, to hold everything together, you have your radical symbol. Now that we've discussed the parts of a radical, let's solve one. Here we have 4 radicals that we want to solve. The first one is going to be our square root of 25. Now, for all of these, I want you to first identify what is the radical. And in doing that, we have to identify what is the index. The index here is an understood 2. Remember, you don't have to write the 2. When you have a square root, that's your most basic radical, so we don't typically write 2. We write everything else, but not necessarily the 2. So this is going to be your square root. How about this one? This is going to be your cube root or your third root. How about this one? This is going to be your fourth root. And this one is going to be your 8th root. So that index is going to pretty much tell you that this is going to be your equation here. This is going to be your equation here. This is going to be your equation here. And this is going to be your equation here. So going back to this first example here, do we have a number when you multiply it by itself, you get 25? Yes, this is 5. How about this? Is there a number that when multiplied by itself 3 times, you get 27? Yes, that is 3. When you multiply 3 by itself 3 times in this fashion, you will get 27. How about this? Do we have a number that will multiply by itself 4 times, get you 16? Yes, this is going to be 2. If you multiply 2 by itself 4 times, you will end up with 16. And how about this last one? This is a big one. Do we have a number that when you multiply it by itself 8 times, you get 65,536? Yes, this is 4. So solving a radical doesn't have to be that difficult. As long as you know what your index is, you can pretty much figure out what your equation is going to have to look like and figure out, is that possible? Now, you might not always get nice, easy radicals, or what we consider perfect radicals. These are perfect radicals because there is a number that when multiplied by itself, the index many times, you get each one of these radicands. However, that's not always the case. You can easily get, let's say, square root of 26. This is not going to be a perfect square root. In this case, you have to do a little bit more math. We're not going to cover in this video. We'll cover in the next video about how to simplify this, but there's something else you can do here. But whenever you have these perfect radicals, this is going to be the most beautiful thing about the radical. It's something that can just easily be simplified into just one number. And it's not terribly hard to do. As long as you can figure out what your equation will look like, you can just plug and chug until you figure out exactly what the number has to be. So we've talked about the different parts of our radicals, and we've actually solved some perfect radicals. Once again, we'll talk about the ones that are not perfect in our next video, but we talked about the perfect radicals and how to solve those. The last thing I want to go over with you is another form that your radical could take. All radicals can be written in another form. So let's say you have a square root of 4 again, right? The square root of 4 can be written in its exponent form. So this is your radical form, but each radical has an exponent form that you can write it in as well. So the square root of 4 will be something like this. You put your 4 inside your parentheses, and then the parentheses has an exponent of 1 over whatever the index is. Now remember, for a square root, the index is not necessarily going to be written here. However, we know it has to be 2. So the index is 2. So your radical will turn into 4 to the 1/2. Remember, it's 1 over the index. Let's say you had the cube root of 27 again. This can be rewritten as 27 in parentheses 1 over whatever the index is. In this case, it's 3. This is your exponent form of your radical. Let's use our big example. Let's say we had the 8th root of 65,536. We can rewrite that as 65,536 inside your parentheses 1 over what is the index? The index is going to be 8. So 1/8. All your radicals can be written in exponent form by simply raising the radicand to 1 over the index. So if you see any one of these forms, it means the same exact thing. This is going to be 2 here, this is going to be 3 here, and this is going to be 4 here. So I hope you're able to follow on today's examples, and I hope you realize just how simple your radical can be. But remember, if you have any question about what you saw here today, remember you can put them in the comment box below. And if you have any question about your own homework, visit me on my Facebook page at Tutor Me Sempai and tell me all about it there. If you found this video helpful, remember to leave a like. It really helps the channel by letting YouTube know that you found this video helpful. And if you found it helpful, someone else could as well. So if you haven't done so already, leave that like, hit the notification bell, smash the subscribe button, and share this video with a friend. Well, that's all the time I have for today. I'm really hoping this helped with your homework, and I'm looking forward to seeing you again next week. I'm Courtney, and this is another session of Tutor Me Sempai.